I'm Michelle, and we're going to talk about how I and you can use mindfulness, compassion, and connection to find your inner calm and a little more sanity in your parenting. Your greatest weakness may also be your greatest strength. Hi, I'm Michelle, and I help parents who want to parent peacefully, to foster strong relationships with their children, and at times find it very hard. When my kids were small, I found myself so overwhelmed and burnt out that not only did I struggle with responding peacefully or playfully, but I got caught in an awful yelling pattern followed by over yelling, overwhelming shame because yelling was the last thing that I wanted to do. In each episode, I weave in emotionally focused therapy tools as well as what I've learned applying hand in hand parenting tools and conscious parenting into my own family for the last 10 years. So now let's talk about how I and you can use the science of mindfulness and self compassion to find your inner calm and a little more sanity in your parenting. So, today's show, your greatest weakness may also be your greatest strength. My family and I were walking through the woods. It was a beautiful day. The sun was out. The temperature was ideal. We were camping. I love going camping with my family. Every time I'm there, I'm always think, why don't we camp more often? Why don't we camp every weekend? And it was just, one of those ideal times to be camping and to be taking a hike through the woods. And there wasn't any place else that I would have rather been in that moment. And as I was walking, my phone vibrated in my pocket. And it was a call that I was expecting from my daughter's teacher. And my breath caught and I stopped and I sat down. My family went on without me and I took the call. And she proceeded to tell me with lots of love and kindness that she thought my little girl may need to get some testing done because she was struggling in several different ways academically. My heart sank. I had anticipated this call. I knew my daughter was struggling, and now it was becoming very real. I also wasn't surprised because I had similar struggles when I was in elementary school. Months later, I sat around a table with teachers and school administrators and a diagnostician, and they informed me that my daughter had dyslexia as well as other learning disabilities that were causing school to be very challenging for her. And I wasn't surprised. I too had struggled to learn to read, to focus, and generally just get things at the same pace as my peers. The teachers, the school administrators, and the diagnostician, they began to explain the support that they had to offer my daughter. And it was a mix of emotions. Slowly, I didn't really, even though I have a history of being a special education teacher, surprisingly, I hadn't specialized in learning and working with kids with dyslexia, and I hadn't learned that much about dyslexia. Um, and so I really wanted to, of course, understand it. This is something now that my daughter is going to be facing or has been dealing with. So I just started learning, of course, everything I could, as you do as a parent. And many of the books and the resources talked about dyslexic strengths and dyslexic thinking. And I had no idea that dyslexia could have any strengths associated with it. And not only were they describing strengths, but they were talking about them as superpowers. I was introduced to many famous people who were dyslexic and how their dyslexia specifically was their source of creativity and out of the box thinking and high emotional intelligence and the ability to influence others and have clear communication, have high curiosity and energetic investigation of ideas, like all these amazing strengths that help them be amazing actors and actresses, CEOs, creative thinkers, influencers, like all these different amazing things. And they did, of course, also talk about how difficult school was. And it began to sound like school was an obstacle that they had to get through in order to get to adulthood where they could just be free to work and live in the ways that suited them best, that they could like actually live out their strengths. And it occurred to me, and that as I was reading and learning about all these dyslexic superpowers, that they would likely not want to give up their dyslexia to avoid the pain and suffering they endured as kids, because it was indeed their superpower as an adult. And I had been previously, before learning about my daughter's dyslexia diagnosis and all of this research, I had been listening to meditation teachers talking about accepting parts of yourself that feel unacceptable for years, kind of like just a little, a little whisper in my ear. This could be good. You want to try to accept things about yourself rather than push them away. And I agreed with the premise, but I also thought, seriously, am I supposed to befriend my depression and anxiety? Is that supposed to help me? Like, yeah, uh-huh. I'm accepting my depression. Yep, I accept my anxiety. But really, honestly, I was meditating and listening to meditation teachers to try to expel these parts of myself that I didn't like, that caused me a lot of pain and suffering. And I was starting to see that even though that dyslexia could be terribly painful and discouraging and frustrating thing to live with, especially at school for school age kids, but even older kids, that it was also clearly these people's greatest strengths. And it opened my eyes to the possibility that maybe the meditation teachers were right. Maybe these things that we hate about ourselves, when looked at through a different lens, maybe these things that have caused us a lot of pain and suffering could also be our greatest strengths. And actually, for those of you on YouTube, I got this tattoo on my wrist that is a sun. I don't know if you can see it, a sun and a moon, to as a reminder that yes, there are dark sides to things that can be painful and difficult and cause us suffering, but sometimes those things can have a light side as well. Even the moon is so freaking beautiful sometimes when you look up at it, especially when it's a full moon, it's low in the sky. Um, and so I wanted to remember this. So I decided to tattoo it on my body for the rest of time. And I wanted to really I wanted to kind of have this new lens, not only for my daughter, but also for myself, that and I want you to think about this for yourself. And I want you to think about, are there any things that I wish I could, cut off, like have a lobotomy, get rid of it? So to give you an idea of like, for example, I grew up with undiagnosed dyslexia and ADHD. I felt stupid. I felt embarrassed. I felt less than compared to my peers and siblings. I carried these feelings into adulthood and it was painful. But on the flip side, now, thanks to my daughter, learning about my dyslexic thinking is also my source of creativity, out of the box thinking, having high emotional intelligence, the ability to influence others, have clear communication, have high curiosity, energetic investigation of ideas, like very energetic. And all these traits serve me immensely as a therapist, as a writer, as a speaker. My ADHD gives me the ability to hyper focus. When I really am into something, I can like zone in a way that it feels like a superpower. It really does. It gives me amazing energy and drive and the courage to take risk and to bet on myself. So, yes, these things have caused me a lot of pain and suffering, and likely are causing my daughter pain and suffering right now. But they are also sources of strength, they're also superpowers. Even my depression has a bright side. The thing is, I'm highly sensitive. I care deeply about many things. You can hear the emotion in my voice. I'm just an emotional person. I'm impacted by people, by life, and things that matter a lot to me. And this serves me in my career. It also serves me as a wife, a mother, a friend. So I guess I don't want to have a lobotomy. I guess I don't want to give up my depression and whatever my brain chemistry is that sometimes leads it off in that direction because it's also my source of sensitivity and passion and deeply caring, things that I most value about myself. So I want to ask you this question. What qualities about you what qualities about yourself have you disliked, maybe for years, maybe your entire life, and wished that you could remove? Are there any bright sides that you can find in them? Maybe you can search the internet. Maybe you could get some help with this search if you can't think of them yourself. You could also ask people that you trust. You could ask a friend, a partner, family. I've really always disliked this about myself. Like, what are things, is that ever a strength that you think that I have? Or are there any upsides into that you see? There's people that you shouldn't ask. Don't ask those people. Ask the people who you trust, who see the good in you. Yeah, so I'd really love for you to ask yourself this question. And of course, what about your children or your child? Especially the things that drive you the most crazy about your kids, right? I mean, if you have a kid with ADHD, there's a lot of things that can be really annoying and frustrating about that. Maybe you have a child with a learning disability or some other kind of disability. Maybe you have a kiddo who's strong-willed. There's a lot of things about parenting children with different, brain differences that can be really difficult. But what if those things are also your kiddo's greatest strength? And what if you look at them through that lens? How would it be for your kiddo to have that feeling of like, even though I mess up and even though I make mistakes and even though I really annoy people sometimes, my mom or dad or my parents, they really see the good in me. They see my strengths. What would that feel like for them? So, three takeaways from this conversation today. One, our weaknesses are not always 100% negative, and your weaknesses may have strengths. They may even be some of your greatest qualities. And three, you may have to spend time looking for how a weakness in yourself or your child may also be a strength. It may not be completely obvious or on the surface, and it will be worth your time and effort. I can promise you that. And how does this apply directly to parenting? When we dislike or even hate parts of ourselves, it is really difficult. It makes it way more challenging to turn towards ourselves with compassion. And in my eyes, compassion is the key to getting to know ourselves. Without it, we don't want to look. We don't want to see all the ways that we mess up or all of our, weaknesses or areas for that we need to improve. We kind of want to look away. But if we can turn towards ourselves with compassion, then we can learn. Then we can look, we can be curious, and we can look closely because compassion makes it tolerable. And seeing the good in our kids provides them with a shield of resilience to get through life because they will know no matter what happens outside of the home, at school, even into adulthood, they'll know I'm loved and accepted at home. My parents, they see the good in me, even when I mess up, even when I make mistakes. And that is really powerful. I hope this has been helpful and maybe a little thought-provoking. The light in me sees the light in you. Be well. A reminder, this content is intended for educational purposes only and should not be used as a replacement for private psychotherapy services. Compassionate Heart Mindful Life does not provide psychotherapy services in any capacity. This is not therapy and should not be a substitute for mental health treatment. If you need mental health treatment, please find a qualified professional in your area. Thanks again for listening.